Hello, welcome to the channel. Thank you for choosing to watch this video. My name is Luca. I am a young financier. I'm currently doing my master's in finance at IE Business School, and I decided to make this video to talk about two things that I'm passionate about, which is finance and also my birth country, the Republic of Georgia. As you could probably tell by my accent, I am also an American citizen. However, given that the finance market in America is quite developed and it is pretty much not so at all in the Republic of Georgia, I decided to start making videos to talk about financial topics that I'm interested in, where I can see improvements for people in general on an individual level, in this case, in this video, on a governmental level for the Republic of Georgia. So yeah, we're gonna get right into it. So to tell you a bit about myself, my name is Luka Mushkudiani. I'm 25 years old, originally born in Tbilisi, Georgia. I'm doing a double master's in finance and management in IE Business School. I have received 10% academic achievement for being in the top 10% during my first master's in the management one. This also allowed me to become a member of the Beta Gamma Sigma Society, and I've also, from the faculty, have received an Outstanding Community Member Award due to my respectful um, and professional behavior around campus with faculty and my fellow students. Before that, I got my bachelor's in business administration at Caucasus Business School back in Georgia, where I finished with the finance major with an honors diploma. I'm currently the head of finance at a U.S. logistics company that is operating in Georgia, and I'm also a former analyst at TBC Capital, specifically at the brokerage department. The aim of my videos is basically to encourage open discussions. I have made a Georgian version of this video as well, and now I'm doing it in English. Basically, the goal is to encourage open discussions so that people, basically, free speech is not as let's say it's not as respected in Georgia as someone may think, because it is very politicized in a sense that when you try to talk about specific economical or societal problems, people sometimes or most frequently will kind of reprimand you for it because they will assume if you do not like the solution that you are proposing, that if they do not like the solution that you're proposing, they will automatically assume that you're part of the opposite political party, and they will make a whole bunch of assumptions about you that may not be true. And I think the fear of being judged is quite prevalent. I've certainly felt it myself, so the aim of these videos is to basically talk about economic and financial issues without the fear of being reprimanded. As I said in my other video, I basically want to put my one small brick in building a foundation to create a space where people can discuss these things freely. The aim also is to identify problems and separate them from the symptoms so that we can get to the root of the problems. An example of this would be if you have fever, for example, and you go to the doctor will not tell you that your problem is fever. The problem is a virus or something else, basically, that is causing fever. So the aim of the discussions is to try to encourage people to dig deep into things that they may see as problems, but may turn out to be symptoms of a much broader problem that we can tackle together through the open discussions that we have. And finally, if we're going to talk about problems, we might as well help create solutions as well. And I think, given the political situation in Georgia, where the government is still a big player in markets, I think the most optimal solution is to create and increase the popularity of practical solutions so that their likelihood of implementation becomes higher, despite whatever political party is in power. So the aim of the presentation is to talk about and introduce what option contracts are and how it affects the government of Georgia and to international investors. But before I talk about what options are and how we can use them to help hedge against a risk that investors may deal with when operating in Georgia, I want to talk about basically what economic well-being is and where Georgia's potential is to improve economic well-being. So to start off, well, economic well-being is the ability to meet your basic needs and material wants. And well-being is created through the process that you see on the graph here. It's a simple business cycle that I just put together. Essentially, what happens is when capital investments are made, jobs are created, and when you take human capital and, well, ordinary capital, and you basically mix them in a most optimal way, you get an increase in productivity, which is the value produced by each resource involved in labor. And you're productive when you are using the least amount of resources to generate the maximum amount of value. And that cannot be achieved if you don't have capital investments. And therefore, when you have increased productivity, you then increase your economic well-being by producing value, which is basically a good and a service that other people are willing to pay money for. So through producing and through paying people for producing such value, then you achieve economic well-being, and the country becomes more attractive to investors, and thus the cycle repeats. Then this then poses a question of where Georgia's potential for economic well-being actually is. Um, and I was looking for basically improvements in sectors where people that were born in the 70s and 80s could be employed. Because just recently, one of the investment banks in Georgia, Galton Taggart, recently released a report where they talked about how the IT sector in Georgia is improving. And even though that is quite amazing, the only issue I see with that is that a lot of people that were born in the 70s and 80s got introduced to technologies quite late, and they do not have the skill set to be able to become successfully employed within the IT industry. So therefore, I was trying to think about sectors where, well, where are the sectors where we can actually produce things rather than just focus on the service side of things? I wanted to see what the international opinion of this was. So I looked into what the World Bank had to say, what the United Nations had to say, and pretty much these organizations agree on the idea that Georgia's potential is to make improvements in agriculture. And it is not surprising that that is the case because Georgia's land is basically produces the most amazing food I think that you could possibly consume. So if you ever, well, if you do ever decide to visit Georgia, make sure you consume as many national dishes as you can because you'd be surprised how amazing things taste over there. So therefore, if we put capital investments in agriculture, we can become less dependent on foreign countries by reducing imports. And if we also uh, improve exports, then our national currency, which is called the Georgian lari, could strengthen against the US dollar and the euro. Um, well, here comes the question. If we have a potential to increase our well-being through this way, why haven't we done so yet? Well, the same organizations, as we discussed previously, they talk about how there is low productivity in this sector. And as we discussed, it is very important for productivity to be at a high level in order for economic well-being to be achieved. And as these organizations say, the problem of low productivity stems from small scale production, uh, the underuse of modern technologies, and the lack of knowledge on how to use these modern technologies in the sector. So, in order to improve productivity, capital investments need to be made for these modern technologies and machineries to be put in place. But making capital investments does not come without risk. And it is very important to talk about risk, especially when we talk about the country of Georgia, because it is located at a very geopolitically unstable place. And for investors from the US and from Europe, um, Georgia's climate is not the same one that they're used to back in Europe and back in the US. So it is much more important to identify these risks for them. So before they invest millions of dollars or millions of euros, that they are aware of the risks they're taking, so that actually more importantly, we are aware of the risk that they're facing, so that we can try to help them insure or hedge against them. Well, the main risks that come from investing in Georgia is firstly the political risk. As you can see on the map here, we have We have four neighbors, and sometimes our neighbors are not in the best conditions and do not make the best choices. And therefore, their actions do affect us because we're living right next door to them. There's also the economic risk. Basically, economic prosperity is still heavily dependent on foreign aid and remittances. A lot of Georgia's population lives abroad, and they are sending money back home for people to be able to consume things. So that is a risk in and of itself because you don't know how reliable these remittances are. Next is currency risk. I think this is probably the biggest risk, but to our advantage, it is actually in our hands to mitigate them, and I'll explain it how when we talk about options. So the Georgian lari is an illiquid and volatile currency, and it makes it difficult for investors who want to take their profits home in their home currencies to be able to convert them in a way where it can be profitable. And finally, we have market risk. Well, Georgia's population is around 3.7 million, which is not big at all. One of my Indian classmates made a joke, said, "We have more people in one neighborhood than you have in your entire country." So, given the small size of the market, it is important for Georgia to have many free trade agreements as possible, which the country is working towards and has made amazing achievements in. But the market risk remains for the local consumer market nonetheless. Well, here comes the big question. How can we hedge against these risks, and can we use financial instruments to do so? Well, luckily, we can through option contracts, and specifically put option contracts. To briefly explain them, a put option is a contract between two parties where at a predetermined price, one party is given the right to sell an asset, and the other one is given the obligation to buy the same asset. So if you imagine it with a stock, let's say you own a stock, and you think that the price may go down. Well, you can buy a put option, which essentially will give you the right to sell the option higher than the market price. So if you let's say buy an option at 10, and you think that the price may go down, you can buy a put option. So if the price goes down at 5, you can, for example, still be able to sell the option at 8, therefore reducing your losses. But option contracts can also be made on foreign exchange rates to basically hedge against the changes within foreign exchange rates, so that you can be insured against currency risk. So, what type of options would we be using here, and how would the process work? Well, options are traded in two ways. An option can either be sold in the financial markets, or it can be made over the counter, basically made between two parties separately. Well, the thing is, you cannot buy options at an exchange if there is no demand for them. Basically, if options are not standardized, you cannot find them on the exchange. And since the Georgian lari is a very low demanded currency, since it's an illiquid currency, therefore you cannot find options on the financial markets for them. So we would need to we would need to consult the local investment banks, which would be Galton Taggart and TBC Capital, to basically help us make these option contracts for the investors. And given that Georgia's situation with the government is that the government is a big player in the financial markets in Georgia, there is basically no way to avoid, no way to there's basically no other counterparty that can uh, basically help the investors hedge against these risks other than the government. So the idea is for the government to use the investment banks in negotiation with investors to create such put options so that the investors feel more safe to make investments worth of millions of dollars or euros. Um, in the next slide, I'm going to show you an example of how basically the process would work. So as an example, let's take the years from 2023 to 2030, and let's assume that the average exchange rates between the US dollar and the Georgian lari is indicated on the blue line, while the exchange rate that is indicated in the option is on the orange line. Well, if I'm an investor and I do have options that allow me to basically convert my money at the end of every year, and I have the option to do so at the given rates, basically either of the rate of my option contract or of the rate in the market. Well, If the exchange rate is higher than the option rate, then I would be using my option rate to basically make the most out of my money. But if it's lower than that, which is the case in 2026 and 2027, then I would be using the market rate. That's the beauty of the option, that you do not actually have to exchange it if you do not need to. To put this in perspective, we can use an example. Let's assume that we created a company in 2024, and at the end of every year, our net profit is 100,000 Georgian lari, and we want to convert this back in US dollars. Well, if we have option contracts, we have the option to convert this money in the at the rate that is indicated in the contract instead of the market rate. This gives us the opportunity, for example, our biggest amount that we would save would be in 2025 when we would convert at 2.8 instead of 3.3, thus netting us $35,000 and saving us $5,000 that we would have lost if we did not have the option contract. So, as I said, options are amazing to have in situations like this because even though we may think 5,000, for example, is very low, in percentage perspective, that is 15% that we would be saving just by holding the options. So, the government can do an amazing thing to help the investors hedge against this. So if the government of Georgia were to be interested in this, I've outlined four general steps that it can take in order to make this happen. Well, first and foremost, I have had dealings with the government agency that deals with land and land ownership. And basically, in Georgia, land can have two designations. It can be agricultural or non-agricultural. And I think that a full audit of land should be carried out so that we would have updated data. Because from what I could guess right now, our data is not updated, and we don't know exactly what size of land we have, where we have it, and what benefits we can reap from it. And I think if the audit is done, then then the government can talk to investors specifically and give them the correct information on the lands that they would be investing on. Next, it is important to understand that the Constitution of Georgia strictly regulates land ownership by non-Georgian citizens. And in order to find out more information about this regulation in English was quite difficult. I actually tried to use ChatGPT, the AI, and even that one had difficulty, could not find it. It just recommended to me to find lawyers to understand the whole implications of it. So I think that it is very important for the government to create a website where an investor that may be interested in investing in Georgia, for them to go to this website, find the necessary information that they need in much lower volume, so that just by reading through the website, they can get an idea, a sense if they want to invest in Georgia or not. I think this is very necessary to be done because lack of information is always bad, but an abundance of information can at least help people be sure that they can do as much research as they can in order to in order to get a sense if they want to carry out further research for an investment or not. So with these two steps taken, then the next step would be for the government to talk to investment banks and negotiate with investors to help determine what option contracts that they actually need in order to hedge against this currency risk. And I think the added benefit that can come from this is that when Georgia, if Georgia were to do this, then it would signal to the world its readiness to introduce financial instruments in order to hedge risks for its investor base. Therefore, probably also contributing to future development by attracting interest from other multinational banks, multinational investors, and so forth. And finally, if investors are interested in participating in this type of project, then the needs that they have on what kind of skill set that they require from the workforce uh, would have to be communicated to the people so that people would be able to brush up their skill set and learn the skills that they need in order to be ready to become successfully employed when these companies would be built. And that's it. This presentation was quite general. It was basically an overview. I wanted it to be that way because this is the first video that I'm making in this kind of about this kind of topic. So I hope it was I hope it at least got the idea across, and I do hope that it was informative, at least from a general perspective. If you would be interested in learning more about this, or if you would be interested in any other type of video, whether it's about finance in Georgia or finance in general, please let me know down in the comments because I'd be very interested to hear your opinions on it. If you liked the video, please be sure to like and subscribe because that would help me out a lot. And thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great day.